2.4 to 2.5% is the percentage of NFL teams that make the playoffs after starting 0-3. The last team to make the playoffs after starting 0-3 was the Houston Texans in 2018. And that is why an 0-2 start is one of the worst positions to be in the NFL, because if you lose that third game, there is virtually no chance of you making the playoffs. And today we're going to talk about the 10 teams that are currently winless or 0-2 outside of the Dolphins, who are 0-3 and already have that 2% chance to make the playoffs. And we're going to see, do any of these teams not only have a chance to win that third game and avoid becoming 0-3, and how many of these teams do we think can still make the playoffs? What is our concern level with each of these winless teams? Because it's not a position you want to be in. That 2.5%, that seems very unlikely. Since 1990, out of 165 teams to begin the year 0-3, only 3 of them, or no, only 4 of them have made the playoffs. So let's see how concerned are we with each and every one of the 10 current winless teams in the NFL. First team I mentioned is the Dolphins, because they are 0-3. Their season is basically over based on the percentages. They could replicate what the 2018 Texans did, but with how this team has looked, they didn't look good against the Colts. They kept it competitive against the Patriots team, who isn't necessarily one of the best teams in the league by any means. And then they honestly impressed me a lot in that Bills game, but then they just couldn't get it done at the end. They had the roughing the punter penalty, and then Tua throws the interception. And now they have to go against the Jets next week. If Fields isn't playing, they could win that game, go to 1-3. They could beat the Panthers, get to 2-3. They do got Cleveland on their schedule. They play the Jets again. They play the Saints. Those are winnable games. But you also play the Chargers, the Ravens, the Bills, the Commanders, the Falcons, the Bengals, which Joe Burrow might be healthy in that game as well. You got the Buccaneers. I just don't see a world where the Dolphins make the playoffs. Again, they're already 0-3. Their chances are already incredibly slim. So they are obviously the team that I am most concerned with, because they have already gotten to that 0-3 point. Next team we have is the New York Giants, who looked very bad against the Commanders in week 1, but they actually played a very good game, at least offensively, against the Dallas Cowboys. And they honestly could have, maybe even should have, won that game versus the Cowboys. But now they have to go against the Chiefs on Sunday night, another team that we'll get to later in this video, fighting to avoid going 0-3. So can they beat the Chiefs and avoid that 0-3 skid? And if they do, they then have to go against the Chargers. They still have to play the Eagles twice. They still have to play the Commanders, who beat them pretty bad earlier in the year. They still have to play the Lions. They still have to play the entire NFC North, which is the best division in football. You still play the Niners. You still play the Broncos. I mean, we knew going into this year that the Giants had one of the most difficult schedules in the league. And if they lose to the Chiefs, they're 0-3 and likely are missing the playoffs, even though no one really predicted the Giants to make the playoffs. But now that they missed out on that window to get that win over the Cowboys, that was their one chance, because, again, even if they beat the Chiefs, looking at this schedule, they're probably not going to do much outside of that. And that was really their opportunity. So my concern level for the Giants, again, I guess I'm not necessarily concerned, because we didn't really have expectations going into the season for them. But in terms of them making the playoffs, I am very, very concerned about the Giants' chances. Same thing with the Cleveland Browns. Excuse the bad quality picture of Joe Flacco, but they play the Packers this week. Don't like their odds of winning that. Then they play the Lions. Then they play the Vikings. Then they play the Steelers. Those are 4 very good teams. I don't think the Browns will make the playoffs. Another team that I'm very concerned with making the playoffs, although same thing with the Giants. Didn't really expect them to make the playoffs either. That's going to be the case for a couple more teams coming up. But this schedule is just brutal, especially literally week 3 against the Packers. It's not looking good for the Cleveland Browns. Same thing goes with the Tennessee Titans. I have liked what I've seen from the Titans. At least in week 1, they were competitive against a good Broncos team, and then they got blown out at home to the Rams. But they could get a win here against the Colts. I know the Colts have been playing amazing football. Don't get me wrong, but it's a home divisional game. Anything can happen in divisional games. So if the Titans want to avoid that 0-3 start, they need to pick it up here against the Colts. I mean, you got Houston the week after that, who's also 0-2 and hasn't looked great. Then you got the Cardinals, who are 2-0, but I haven't been impressed with the Cardinals' 2-0 start. Then you get the Raiders, then you get the Patriots, then you get the Colts. That's not an impossible schedule, at least early on, because then later you get teams like the Chiefs and the Niners and the Seahawks, and the Chargers. But it's not the most difficult schedule for the Titans. If they can somehow manage a way to upset the Colts here in week 3, not only do they avoid starting 0-3, but I think that they could, I don't know about make the playoffs, but I think they could get a decent amount of wins, maybe get like 7-ish wins. But if they go 0-3, I mean, they can still get 7 wins, but they'd have to win 7 of their next 10 versus 6 of their next 10. So the odds are a lot higher if they can get that upset over the Colts. And honestly, I haven't been too disappointed with what I've seen from Cam Ward either, given the circumstances that he's been dealt with. Next team we have is the Saints, another team that we didn't really have high expectations going into the year. But I've been actually very impressed with Spencer Rattler so far and the overall team. They were competitive against the Cardinals. They were competitive against the Niners. Granted, the Niners were a little banged up, but Spencer Rattler's played decent. He has by no way has he been the worst quarterback in the league. But now you have to travel to Seattle. Very tough game. Then you have to travel to Buffalo. I would be very surprised if they win those 2 games. So they could be looking at an 0-4 start. Now, I don't know the percentage of chance if you start 0-4 to make the playoffs. But the internet says it is virtually impossible. So they can't go 0-4, and I think they will to Seattle and Buffalo. Those are very good teams. Despite being competitive, they still haven't managed to get a win. I do think Spencer Rattler and the Saints team, with how they've played early on, especially if they can also be competitive against really good teams like Seattle and Buffalo, I think they can get a lot more wins than we imagined at the beginning of the season. Everyone's like, this Saints team, they're going to win like 2-3 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to get 5 or 6 wins, honestly, with how they've played, considering you play the Giants. The Patriots aren't impossible to beat. The Bears, you play the Panthers twice still. You still got more division games against the Falcons and Bucks. You still play the Titans. You still play the Jets. You play the Dolphins. Like, there are winnable games on this schedule. So while I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, and while I very well think they could start 0-4, with how Rattlers played, I wouldn't be surprised if they get a lot more wins than maybe we thought going into the year. Next, we have the Panthers. Now, they didn't look good at all against the Jags. But against the Cardinals, another slow start, but they picked it up a little bit towards the end. They made that game competitive. You can agree or disagree with, how they made the game competitive. That really shows that they can be a good team. But in that second half of that Cardinals game, they showed me they could be a competent, competitive NFL team. And they have winnable games on their schedule, like the Falcons, home divisional game. Anything can happen, even though the Falcons have been playing much better. The Patriots, the Dolphins, the Jets. You can still play the Saints twice. You play the Falcons again. Like, there are winnable games on their schedule. So similar to the Saints, I don't think they'll make the playoffs, especially if they lose here to Atlanta. But I do think they could get a handful of wins towards the end, like overall after the season. But they do need to pick it up early in these games because they have started off very slow. And I'm very worried for the Panthers' chances of making the playoffs. Now going into the teams that maybe had a little bit of higher expectations going into the year. First team we have is the Chicago Bears. They bring in Ben Johnson. They get year 2 of Caleb Williams. You bring in all these new offensive linemen. And we're like, this is the year the Bears can make that leap and be an 8-ish, 9-ish win team. And now they started 0-2. Yes, it was a close game against Minnesota, but it wasn't the prettiest game at all against Minnesota, and I wasn't impressed by their competitive game against Minnesota at all. And then they get blown out by the Lions. Now you have to go against a Dallas team who offensively has played well, but I think that goes against the Bears. I think the Bears need to go against a team that isn't as good offensively in order to have a chance, but Dallas has played very well offensively, and I think they can do that again against the Bears. But if they can manage to beat the Cowboys and avoid that 0-3 start that we keep talking about, then you get a game against the Raiders. That could potentially put them at 2-2. Then you get a bye week. Week 5 bye week is crazy, by the way. Then you get the Commanders, rematch of the Hail Mary game. Now the Commanders haven't played their best football yet, but that's obviously not going to be an easy game. Then you get the Saints. You can beat them. But then that schedule gets brutal. You get Baltimore, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Philly, Green Bay again, San Fran, Detroit. I think they could possibly avoid starting 0-3 and go into the bye week at a 2-2 record. If they want to make the playoffs, they have to get those 2 games against Dallas and the Raiders. If they start 1-3 going into that post bye week schedule of that we mentioned earlier, it's going to be rough for the Bears' chances of making the playoffs, and they haven't looked good in their first 2 games. So this game against Dallas is very likely a must-win game. I mean, any team that starts 0-2 week 3 is a must-win game, but considering the schedule, this is definitely a must-win game for the Bears if they want to make the playoffs. And with all the expectations we had going into the season for the Bears, my concern on the Bears is very high with their chances of fulfilling those expectations. Next team we have is the New York Jets. They almost beat the Steelers week 1, and then they go and play the Bills. Justin Fields gets hurt, and overall the team just doesn't look good against the Bills. And now you have to travel with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, travel to Tampa Bay to take on a very good Bucs team. I just don't know if I like the Jets' odds of winning that game against Tampa. And I think they might start 0-3. Now, if they do start 0-3, you then have to play Miami, which, you could win that game. But then you get Dallas, then you get Denver, and then you get a little stretch of Carolina, Cincinnati, Cleveland, New England, which is favorable, but then it's Baltimore, Atlanta. So they have like stretches of winnable games and then stretches of difficult games. But they're going to go into that stretch of games 0-3 if they lose to Tampa, and it might not matter how many winnable games they have on their schedule if they start 0-3 against Tampa. I don't think they're going to win that game. And if they do lose that game, a team that had somewhat high expectations, especially after week 1, I feel like once week 1 happened, we're like, okay, Justin Fields and this offense looked pretty good. The defense didn't look good against Aaron Rodgers, but you know they have the talent on that defense to play well. And then it kind of fell apart against Buffalo, and now they have to go against Tampa with their backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, to try and avoid going 0-3. Now the Texans are the next team. Texans are this might be the team that I'm the most, I don't know about most concerned, but most surprised by with how underwhelming they've been. They play the Rams week 1, and they don't do anything offensively. I know the Rams have a good defense, but they don't look good at all. Then they go into Tampa Bay, or play Tampa Bay, and once again, their offense just lets them down. They have that one touchdown on Nico Collins, which was great, but then the O-line lets them down. The run game isn't there. C.J. Stroud isn't playing perfect. Feels like he has to with this Texans team. And they get bailed. They were constantly, the only reason they were in that game is because their special teams and their defense. Their defense has played great. Don't get me wrong. Their defense has been amazing. But that offense really needs to pick it up if they want a chance to make their 3rd straight playoffs. Now, I don't think they'll start. I do think they have a chance to avoid starting 0-3 because they go against Jacksonville. And I think they have a chance to start 2-2, beating Jacksonville and Tennessee. Then you get Baltimore, Seattle, San Fran, Denver. But this is, not only is this a must-win game against Jacksonville because it's a divisional game, but it's to avoid starting 0-3. And if the Texans, the Houston Texans, a team that has won 2 playoff games over the last 2 years in total, to start 0-3, and if they were to start 0-4 with a loss to the Titans at home, that would be disastrous for Houston. But right now, they got to worry about Jacksonville. And I do think they have a chance to win that game, even though Jacksonville has played all right. I do think they have a chance to win that game, but it is definitely a must-win game for the Texans. And then finally, probably the most surprising team just in general. When you look at who they've played, it's not as surprising maybe. I know the Texans have played good teams too, but the Kansas City Chiefs 0-2 for the first time I think they've said since like 2014. But the one bright side you can say about the Chiefs 0-2 start is they barely lost to the Chargers, who are arguably a top 5 team in the league, and they barely lost to the Eagles, who are arguably the best team in the league. And they've done that all without any receivers healthy. Xavier Worthy's hurt. Rashid Rice is suspended. Travis Kelce's old. And they've still and they have no run game either. Like Pacheco and Kareem Hunt haven't really done anything. So to be competitive against those two teams isn't the end of the world, I think, for the Chiefs. And now you get to go at New York on Sunday night and play the Giants. If they can beat the Giants, get to 1-2, I think then we'll be able to really see how concerned we are with the Chiefs. Like, this Giants game is crucial. If they go in and lose to the Giants, the season's over. You start 0-3, you lost to the Giants, and now you got to play Baltimore next week. But if they can beat the Giants, get to 1-2, we'll then have to see what happens in that Baltimore game. Because if they can stay competitive against Baltimore, even if they lose 1-3 with losses to Baltimore, LA, the Chargers, and the Eagles, it's not great, 1-3. But their schedule eases up just a little bit, but not really. But it's really all about that Giants game. Because right now the Chiefs are teetering of being at risk of missing the playoffs for the first time. We talk about how Mahomes hasn't even missed the AFC Championship game since becoming a starter for the Chiefs. And now he might miss the playoffs. So, I mean, quickly going over these teams, I think the Chiefs can turn it around. I think the Texans can turn it around. And I don't know about any other team. But we'll see if any of these teams outside the Dolphins, because they've already gone 0-3, can any of these teams, can the Chiefs, the Texans, the Saints, the Jets, the Browns, the Panthers, the Bears, the Titans, and the Giants all avoid going 0-3? Now, granted, the Chiefs and Giants play each other, so one of those teams is going to be 0-3. But let me know your thoughts on these teams. Who do you think can save their season, make the playoffs? Do you think any of these teams will surprise you by making the playoffs, even though they're potentially the worst team in some of the worst teams in the league? Let me know in the comment section. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.